But let's move on to another story because people have been talking a lot about Jon Stewart as another individual, another
Yeah,
name
I know.
who
Yeah.
might be a potential outsider lefty who could run for president in 2028. Kyle Kalinske, obviously, has been a huge advocate
Yeah.
of this idea. So I'm excited to get your opinion on that in a second,
Yeah.
Dieter. But I've been pretty down with it for a while. You know, I've been on that page, on that team, whatever you want to say. Like, you know, this is a decent proposition. Jon Stewart is a beloved character. He's well known. He's funny. You know, that's all that you need. He's progressive. Let's go. But this is the first thing I've seen from Jon Stewart lately that kind of threw me off. And honestly, I don't really know how to respond to this. I don't really know what to make of it.
Is it the
Maybe
Hakeem Jeffries interview?
no, although I haven't seen that either.
You got to see the Hakeem Jeffries interview, man. You got to check it out because he let Hakeem Jeffries get away with a lot.
Well, that's unfortunate. But this one was pretty odd. Apparently, he kind of has been downplaying actually Trump's fascist threat or fascist potential, and he was actually asked about it here. Apparently, after his show, I didn't even know they necessarily did this on the Daily Show, but I guess this guy just asked him a question, and he responds. And I don't know if this is a very satisfying answer. I don't know if this is a very satisfying answer. I don't know if this really meets the moment. It seems a little bit too calculated to me. But I'm genuinely interested in your opinion after we're finished watching this, Dieter, because again, I don't necessarily agree with Jon Stewart. I don't really know what he's doing here. I would love your opinion.
What do you say to your critics who are saying that you're being light on the fascist message recently?
Oh, I tell my critics, shut up. You're a fascist. No. So I do appreciate that because I understand the desire, but like I'm very big on, and I know it's annoying, but specificity. And
yeah,
nuance.
Me too.
And I think if you cry fascism at every administrative overreach, even the ones that are constitutionally okay, you will find yourself out of fascism bullets when the time really comes to remind people of, because you will, I think what the media has done over the last 10 years is cry wolf to the point where they numbed everybody. It was an anesthetic. And it got to where, what was the thing they litigated throughout this campaign? He's a fascist. He's a terrible person. Democracy is on the ballot. Guess what lost at the ballot? If you told us democracy is on the ballot, well, democracy got its ass kicked by a majority vote. So I'm very cautious about when to know, like, yeah, hopefully I won't do it the night after Kristallnacht. I'll get it but it's like, when do you put your dog down? Like, it's one of those things, like you're not quite sure. But I do understand how annoying that is.
And it's like, I agree with what he's saying about how for years and years, the media and both political parties kind of cried wolf. You know, Obama's a fascist and Mitt Romney's a fascist and everyone who runs is a fascist. Everyone's going to call each other a fascist. For the longest time, that was hyperbolic and it was annoying. You know what I'm saying? Like that is true. There has been a lot of crying wolf, which I do think has led to a lot of people now not taking the threat of Donald Trump as seriously as they should have. But Donald Trump is a threat. He's not just another example of wolf being cried. Like, he actually is the actual wolf. And
yes,
we should take it seriously. And it's not just like, oh, a little bit of overreach here and there is why people refer to him as fascist. No, there's, you know, example after example. He just tweeted out "Long live the king" in reference to himself. His, you know, main crony, Elon Musk, threw up a Sig Heil Nazi salute at his inauguration. He's been threatening to imprison his critics, people like AOC, right? Like, this is trademark fascism. Fascism has come to America. Whether or not we can defeat it remains to be seen, but it's here. And I think that, like, we should at least acknowledge that, right? It shouldn't be something that we should feel stupid about saying or feel like is hysterical to acknowledge. No, it's straight up here in the same way that it was when fucking Franco became the, you know, president or the supreme leader of Spain back in the day. You know what I mean?
Yes. And so that note about specificity is crucial because generality is the death of art, according to Stanislavski, the most legendary acting coach of all time. And that implies that specificity is the key to a good story. talk to any stand-up comic or writer or whatever. Specificity reigns supreme in the craft of storytelling and, by extension, communication. So fascism is too general of a term, and it actually relates back to what I was saying earlier about the heartless one percenters and the Confederate flag-waving, Bible-beating gun nuts. It's not enough to say anymore, MAGA is the problem. It's that specific voter base that will never change, that would rather die than admit that they were wrong. So fascism is not wrong, but labels are only useful if they are specific. So Jon Stewart, based on what I know about him, does not have any life experience in the Deep South. And that's the subculture that we actually should go on offense with and say, this is the base. If you're a Trumplican, if you're a conservative, if you're MAGA, these are your people. So if you want to be part of America's future, there's room for everybody else but them. So fascist, Confederate flag-waving, Bible-beating gun nuts, that's going to help the cause a lot more than just saying fascism. We have an example in 1930s Germany of what's going on in the United States right now. I call what the political strategy that's being used by the Republican Party and has been used since 1980, but really became highlighted and explicit under Trump, is fascism's favorite formula is scapegoat politics, right? I don't know if I mentioned this earlier in the stream, but your life sucks not because you suck. Your life sucks because of those black and brown people taking your jobs, committing crime, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why it was so disappointing that Kamala didn't step up and say, wait a second, you're treating immigrants exactly the way Hitler treated Jews back in 1930s Germany. The historical comparison works if you are specific with it. And one thing that Stewart doesn't do in that monologue that we just saw was that the comparison, the thing that Stewart missed in that commentary that he just offered is that the alternative was Kamala. The alternative was the politics of joy. And yet she was saying, when we fight, we win. Well, the politics of joy isn't fighting. We get to be joyous after we win, right? This is why Stephen A. works in terms of his authenticity, because people are pissed. Stephen A. became a famous sports commentator because he's pissed. There is honesty in anger. There is authenticity in anger. And I believe that the next transformation of the American political system into one of productivity is going to coincide with the transformation of people's justifiable anger into righteous rage that you give to the politicians. The politicians right now, like Jeffries and, if you want to use Wes Moore or Gavin Newsom, because Gavin Newsom talks about playing offense all the time. Well, what does that mean? They should be saying, hey, America, I know you're angry. Give it to me. Give me your anger, and I can do something with it. Don't hang on to it. Meditate, exercise, whatever, but give it to me. And then when I get into office, I can actually transform that into productivity. See, this is the problem with the left. This is the left's narcissism, because we got the artists, we got the creative people, we got the empathetic people. I would argue that a majority of leftists are not fear-driven people. They do not like conflict. They don't even necessarily like competition. Right? But so they want the road to big time change to reflect them. That is narcissism. That is not accepting the limitations of the competitive system. You have to win the game with the rules as they are currently written, whether you like it or not.
Yep.
Whether that's the message. That's what a parent says to their kid. You got to do this. You don't have to like it, but you still got to do it, or you're not getting what you want.
Yep, 100%. Luckily, it seems like most of the comment section of this Jon Stewart video sort of, doesn't necessarily agree with him. This one says, boy cried wolf is a valid argument if it was 4 to 8 years ago. Now it just feels like you're falling for the end of that story where the wolf does show up and you don't believe the boy. So that's pretty funny. And the next one says, here in Denmark, we say fascism and we're not sorry. The imaginary philosophical standpoint only benefits fascism.
But this is my point. So this is the ethos, right? Logos, pathos, ethos, right? The internal credibility of the messenger, right? Jon Stewart, if he were to be like fascism, 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 is not going to resonate as a guy like Gavin Newsom or Wes Moore, some kind of strong athletic person or someone who's righteously angry, who is going to fight for you in a physical sense. Like, does Jon Stewart look like the kind of guy that you want in a fight, in a real fight? Fuck no. No, absolutely not. He doesn't look like the guy who's going to put his fist through the wall because he's so pissed off. And that's the way a lot of Americans are feeling. You know, I was on a webinar with a very prominent Democrat who was telling people to lead with love and don't tell MAGA I told you so. And my response to that is I think we should be doing the exact opposite of those two things. Lead with love to the left, lead with love to the neoliberal corporate centrists who say you keep settling for incremental change when you could have so much more if you get on board with progressives. And if you start talking issues, you'll actually be able to get people to see that they are more progressive than they are neoliberal. And then the I told you so stuff is like, instead of saying I told you so, fine, put it in different terms. Like, yeah, you ready to listen now? You ready to listen and learn and do better? Because I want to win. And it seems like you're comfortable with losing.
Yep, 100%. Looks like, you know, another couple comments. This one says it's not that simple. Democracy was dismantled using entirely constitutional methods in 1930s Germany. Looking at the methods is not enough. You have to look at the goals too. And I think that's another really important point, because even if you don't think that, you know, the Trump administration 23 days in or whatever is like a true, genuine 100% example of fascism, I mean, look at the road we're on. How fucking stupid do you have to be? Look at, you know, the way this stuff happens. It's not necessarily overnight. But I would say in this case, it's been even more swift and more bold than any of us could have imagined. The transition from the, you know, quote unquote democracy we had into this new form of, you know, MAGA fascism that we're already coming to terms with. It's been incredibly swift. It hasn't even, you know, it's not like they've really even taken their time. I think it's pretty obvious to say, you know, what's going on. As this person said, the wolf isn't at the door, he's inside.
Right.
So, you know, fascism is a process, not an endpoint. I think these are all valid points. And I think that Jon Stewart would be wise to sort of edit his comments, because I can understand where he's coming from. I can understand not wanting to come off as hysterical. But I think it's also important to acknowledge where we're at and to be honest about it, while also saying that we can defeat this. Like we can get out of this situation. It's not like we're trapped here forever necessarily, but it is going to take a serious fight, and it is going to take some balls, like you're talking about, Deter.
Yes. And, you know, Jon Stewart is a tremendous shit talker, as are most comedians, but he's not a fighter. He's not a guy that's won anything other than an argument.
Well, I actually disagree with that, because if you look at the way he secured the healthcare for the 9/11
That's true. Good
first
point.
responders,
Yes.
he actually did bring some serious political know-how to DC, the likes of which most actual elected Democrats cannot muster up themselves. He actually was able to use pressure and the bully pulpit and his celebrity and
Sure,
the power
point.
and the power of shame to get these Republicans to vote in the proper way. So I actually do think that is an example of how he already has proven to be a leader. But you're right, for the most part, he's a comedian and a talk show host, not.
I just wish you were mayor of I wish you were mayor of New York right now, so that he could actually, because if you're mayor of New York, you actually are one step away from the presidency. You could, you know, I wish he had demonstrated more of that, of what you're talking about in multiple ways. But, you know, I mean, look, I like Stewart, but I just don't think he's the guy. I think Kulinski's opinion on that has more to do with them having parallel views as opposed to who's actually marketable.
Interesting. I mean, I think Kyle kind of just wants a left-wing version of Trump, in the sense that it's someone who's an outsider, someone with celebrity, someone who's not afraid to say controversial things. Remember, Jon Stewart was the one who went on Stephen Colbert's show and started talking about how the coronavirus Wuhan lab leak way before it was popular. So he is someone who's willing to say things that are unpopular, things that are outside of the liberal orthodoxy, things that normal people might be thinking or feeling, but that don't have permission to say. I do think that Jon Stewart taps into some of those qualities, maybe a little little bit more than you're giving him credit for.
Sure.
And he is genuinely funny too. Like, I was watching his latest Daily Show the other night and cracking up. I don't even remember what he said, but he just says funny things. Like, that is important too, in the same way that Obama was a little bit funny. Obama would just say things that would kind of crack you up off the cuff or in response to his opponent, right? I think Jon Stewart kind of has that.
Okay, so I agree. I think the sense of humor is a very useful tool rhetorically, but really what's required for the political wave that we need to offset and recover from all the damage that's being done is aggression. And that would manifest rhetorically in saying things like Trump is white trash Hitler and his followers are white trash Nazis. Now, the problem with that, it's dangerous, because these white trash Nazis, these Confederate flag waving, Bible beating gun nuts, they're not just overgrown children intellectually with votes. They are overgrown children with votes and guns. So if you start calling the NRA members white trash Nazis, even if you just call them gun nuts or a Confederate flag wave, like treasonous Trump trash terrorists, if you use all these kind of phrases that I have been building up as like an arsenal of words to go after the bully, then you might get killed. But here's the thing. If you get killed, your message is actually going to be served by your death. And someone might climb a clock tower and do this. But this goes back to schoolyard bully psychology, right? How do you beat the bully at recess? You get up in the bully's face and you talk shit and you dare them to hit you so that everybody else at the schoolyard can see how fucking ugly they are. And that is something that you just said it. Where are the balls? Get up in front of the bully, take the hit. You get knocked on your ass, everybody sees it, and they do something about it. It's how civil rights worked, right? The nonviolent approach. Those poor black people were getting hosed down in Birmingham, Alabama. And thanks to modern media in the form of television at the time, the rest of the country saw it and said, wait a second, this kind of bullshit is happening in my country. I'm getting on a train or a plane and getting down to the South and protesting with these people because this is fucking garbage. So you win by numbers, but that whole process of rallying those people to build that coalition starts with taking a punch in the face from the bully. And I don't think that Democrats have the balls to do that. But maybe Stewart does. I mean, I'm open to that. I'm open to that. But until I hear someone call MAGA trash, and Trump white trash Hitler, and Elon Goebbels, I'm not going to be convinced that we're ready to win. I'm just not ready. I think I was talking with this guy, I mentioned him before. He worked for Carter and in the DNC circles. And I don't think they understand that there has been a paradigm shift. The old traditional understanding of centrist voters as the key to success in national elections is no longer the case. Maybe there was a time when baby boomers dominated the electorate where that was the case. There has been a generational shift. I just did an appearance on something called the Gen Z Speaks podcast. And these Gen Zers, man, they do their homework. They know that Israel is committing genocide, and they know because they do their research. And a lot of them didn't show up for Kamala simply because of that one issue. So if we can politically activate that generation and we unite the millennials and the Gen Zers, we can take over this party and by extension, this country's politics, because we grew up in the digital age. We grew up outside of the context of the Cold War. A lot of the reason why the baby boomers struggle to comprehend today's world is because they were products of the Cold War. They don't understand how things have changed, and that right now we've got an internal Cold War going on, and the people waging it is MAGA, and the people not fighting back. It's like an abusive relationship where the husband keeps hitting the woman, and she's like, please stop. He hits me because he loves me. All this crap. And you got to get out. You got to leave him. You say, no, I don't respect you. The respect is the problem.